Well, I'm here with my friend Mike Mullins, and we're looking at his actual main instrument of choice is the mandolin. He's been playing the mandolin for, I don't know, Mike. When did you take up the mandolin?
Oh, it's been at least 35 years now. I think I was 19 when I started, or 20 when I started playing the mandolin. I was a frustrated guitar player, so I just felt like I was stuck in one gear, and I'd heard some music, some various types of music, bluegrass music. I'd heard David Grisman for the first time, and he was a great mandolin player, and I just became interested in that style. Plus, I'd met a friend that I still play with named Bill Griffin in the Cache Valley Drifters, who was the first really good mandolin player I saw up close and personal, and I just got all on fire about playing the mandolin. So I started at that time, and plus with the guitar, I was just not progressing the way I wanted, and so I never really completely stopped playing the guitar, but I did gravitate toward the mandolin, and I found that in some ways it came more naturally to me than the guitar. And plus there weren't as many mandolin players out there, so it was something just a little different. And it actually, ultimately, when I went back to the guitar, started playing more guitar, it had helped. I found it made my right hand stronger and more accurate, and I just was able to, even though the fingering is totally different, the time I spent on the instrument was well spent, and actually made me better on guitar in the long run. I was always struggling with when I was learning to flat pick. I was always kind of struggling with my right hand on the guitar, and when I got into the mandolin, it's a very similar technique, but it transferred back to the guitar pretty well. So yeah, I just really still enjoy this instrument quite a bit, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah.
So how is it tuned?
Well, it's tuned in fifths. It's tuned the same as a violin. From the top down, it's E, A, D, and G. And there's two of each note, though. And they're in unison. I mean, people sometimes do what's called cross tuning, where you tune a string a different note and get a. But I do a thing called split string, where I use a nail to fret one of them, but generally they're both fretted at the same time. That's kind of what gives a mandolin its characteristic sound. Is if you were to string this with just one of each string, it would sound really terrible. There wouldn't be much there, but there's something about having the two unison strings together. There's almost a slight delay that the ear doesn't consciously pick up on, but it gives it a fullness, So
it's kind of built-in tremolo to a certain extent, because when you hit the two notes, you really don't hit them exactly at the same time. So
no,
there's a slight delay.
There is a slight delay.
Which also means they're slightly out of phase, even though they're on the same note. So,
exactly.
So that's what you get by the double string, like a 12-string guitar.
Yes, you do, and it just creates different, just a different, I don't know, just overtones, but it does do something to the sound where it just doesn't work really well to have just in a single string, so they're in choruses. But I've also known players who string their bottom two strings in octaves, so it sounds kind of like, it's kind of what it would sound like if you did that. But I've never really done that. I did that with a mandola, which is the counterpart to the viola. It's slightly larger than the mandolin. It's tuned 1/5 lower. You've got A, D, G, and then there's a C, one octave below that C. Right. On the mandola, and I used to string that one in octaves for the low strings, and it gave it kind of a really interesting sound.
Yeah. But, so even this, the register, like the lowest string you have there, the G, is the same as the open third string on the guitar.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then that high E string is like the E on the 12th fret of the high E.
It's one octave above the E on a guitar.
So the register is way above guitar range, or at least. So.
Yeah, it is. It's the same as a violin. It's the same tuning.
But then you do a lot of the same stuff you do on the guitar. Like you can play rhythm, you'll play chords. So
it's a little different technique on the guitar. Especially in bluegrass or folk, you tend to use a lot of open ringing kinds of chords. That resonate. And on mandolin, you can do that too, depending on the style. Like this open G chord, or A. But in bluegrass, you might want the mandolin is kind of the backbeat. It's like kind of this driving force behind it. The bass hits the downbeat, and the mandolin hits the backbeat. So in bluegrass, you tend to play more closed position kinds of chords to get that percussive effect where you're damping the string. you're kind of holding these closed position chords. This is going to be an A, and then, and that's kind of what you see a lot of in bluegrass. You know, you're sort of squeezing and releasing on the neck to, so you're not just going. It's more like,
so you want the percussive effect, and that's coming in rock stuff. Done much slower than that.
Yeah.
That backbeat is beats 2 and 4 of the measure, and that's what you're doing. You're answering the bass
exactly. Yeah.
just out of step with them, and so you're in bomb, bomb. It's the whole boom chuck thing that you do.
It is.
Guitar.
It's just divided between.
This is half of it.
Yeah.
It's the chuck.
It's the chuck. This is the up chuck. No.
Yeah. So, and then you of course play melodies on it, because especially with this register, it really cuts through all the bassiness of guitars and basses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So when the mandolin takes the melody, it's really clear.
Bluegrass music was originated by Bill Monroe, who of course was a mandolin player, and he kind of popularized this style of mandolin. This is a Gibson mandolin from the 1930s, 1937 actually, and it's a model called an F7. And it's been re-necked many years ago, a longer F5 style, which is the, you know, I could get into all the Gibson nomenclature, but basically this mandolin was converted to an F5. An F7 is a slightly shorter neck. You know, it joins the body at a different spot at the 12th fret instead of the 15th. But the problem with those instruments is it put the bridge in the wrong place. On these F-hole mandolins, the bridge is supposed to be located centrally on the top, right around the points of these F-holes. And with a shorter neck, with the joins lower down the neck, the bridge had to be here. Well, they generally didn't sound very good. So some of these were converted. People aren't really doing that anymore because it kind of ruins the collectability factor, but it made it a better sounding instrument. It was like this when I got it. I got this one in 1991, and I just love the way it sounds. You know, I've had others, but this is the one I've kept. And yeah, and I kind of lost the trail of your question there, Neil. I started...
it was playing chords, and we were into the boom chuck thing.
Yeah.
Talking about that. But then you, of course, play melodies on it. That's what I was saying. In a bluegrass tune, when you take the melody, it's really up in the high register, and that makes it just stand out from all the
Well, yeah, you can do, you know... Or, you know, you can do... gosh, there... You can, the lowest note you can get is this G.
Right.
You kind of use it as a drone, but generally you're doing a lot of stuff up the neck, you know. But yeah, the high notes do kind of stand out. It is the high instrument with the highest register, aside from, you know, the fiddle, you know,
this is the
you get
same.
there too. But the plucked instruments, this is the one that gets you up there as high as you can get, pitch-wise.
Yeah. Is there much? What's out there for solo mandolin?
Oh, solo mandolin. There's a whole style of mandolin playing originated in when mandolins were very, very popular during about the World War I era and before, where there was like it's called a duo style, where you kind of get and it almost sounds like two instruments playing. You're just doing kind of an alternating tremolo thing with a string that's below it. But I play a few solo pieces. Generally, I've been more of an ensemble player, but it's fun to do some things as far as solo stuff. I'll play a little tiny bit of something. I don't know how much time we have. I can just do a little of it to give you an example.
Take your time.
This is one everyone's heard, I think, and I kind of arranged this, well, loosely arranged it for a solo mandolin. It's something you can do with it besides to say doing a fiddle tune.
Right.
Or something. It's and it incorporates that split string technique I was talking about. But that one basically.
Oh my God, that's stunning. Absolutely stunning.
There's guys out there who are really good at that style. I'm sort of just a neophyte. It's only fairly recently I've been trying to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, because mostly what I played is like kind of bluegrass and contemporary styles on the mandolin. You know, some little swing music. Just, you know, just I'm very heavily into David Grisman, and there's other players too. There's a, you know, there's Sam Bush and Chris Thiele and you know. Adam Steffi and John Reichman. These are all stellar players of varying styles. But and that was and there's a guy named Evan Marshall who does great solo work. I mean, you'd swear it's like 2 or 3 instruments playing.
Yeah.
You know, but that, you know, I'm using the pick along with my middle finger to kind of.
Because I saw you do that. You know, you're basically doing some finger picking in there.
Yeah.
At some almost double stop type ideas, but.
Yeah, and my nail broke the other day, so it's like it's not quite as even as it could be. But you know, so that's the kind of stuff I'm sort of fooling around with now, or things like that. But generally, I do a lot of fiddle tune type stuff. I just love to play them. I just love playing fiddle tunes. I like playing bluegrass. I just like sitting around playing with people who are not even playing bluegrass. You know, maybe they're just doing a regular contemporary song, and I'll just play mandolin on it. It's just a lot of fun. You know, it's just, so this is mandolin's been kind of it's helped make me a better guitar player, and you know, kind of at a time I just often wondered if I hadn't taken up the mandolin, if I wouldn't have gotten frustrated enough to even actually stop playing the guitar for a while.
Wow.
I don't know. I think it really. You know, it was an inspiring instrument to take up, and there's a lot of really great players out there right now who are taking up this instrument and taking it places where it hasn't been in about 80 years, because, or, you know, beyond bluegrass. I mean, and
so it was used in Italy, obviously, around World War I and before, I'm sure, too.
Well, yeah, there was gosh, back in medieval times there was an instrument called a mandora, which was the precursor to the mandolin. And then the Neapolitan style of mandolin is the ribbed bowlback model. You know, they have a very sweet sound. They're better for, you know, like more like classical music. Like you can find classical recordings of players using the old bowlbacks. And then the Gibson company started making them carved mandolins in the late 1800s that were more built on violin principles. Yeah. First with an oval sound hole, and then in the early 20s, Gibson, there was an engineer named Lloyd Lohr, there were other people involved in this too, but they thought, well, why not take the violin principle a step further, and we'll use F-holes, and we'll have a cantilevered fingerboard that is actually not attached to the top like a violin. It's elevated, it doesn't touch the top, so the top can vibrate more freely. And so they came up with this concept. And actually there was a company, there was a mandolin from about 1913 that had F-holes, a little company called Shoot or Shut, I don't know how it's pronounced, it's like S-C-H-U-T-T, and it was sort of an A-style, you know, teardrop-shaped mandolin with F-holes. They're made in very small numbers. I did actually see one for sale recently on some website, and I thought it was a real interesting piece of history, because Gibson's kind of credited with the F-hole style. Now, the F-hole style mandolin kind of gives the mandolin a lot of depth and a penetrating quality, much like an arch-top guitar, very percussive, because the top vibrates differently. For certain kinds of music, a round-hole mandolin's better. A lot of Irish and old-timey musicians prefer the round-hole sound. It's a very, very open sound.
Probably a little more sustain on those too.
Absolutely more.
That's what you get with this, is you get the note, a quick attack and a quick decay, like an archtop guitar.
Pretty much. It's similar. I think these are a little more versatile. They're louder. If you try and play bluegrass on a round hole mandolin, the chop chords, as we call them, don't really stand out. They get kind of muffled, but that's not really what they're for. And when they were invented, bluegrass music didn't exist.
Right.
And when these were invented, they were generally regarded to be orchestral type instruments for playing classical music, or to be a solo instrument in an ensemble. The mandolin orchestras were very popular until about 1920. And shortly after that, this mandolin style came about, and it was kind of ironic. At the time, nobody wanted them, because the mandolin boom ended about 1921, and this mandolin came into being about 1922. So they built the greatest mandolin known to man generally acknowledged as the F5 style is the ultimate mandolin at a time when nobody wanted mandolins and nobody was playing mandolin music anymore, and so it was just a little bit after its time. I mean, it was like nobody wanted. It was like George Groon, I think, said if you can invent the greatest buggy whip in the world, but nobody's going to want it after the motor car was invented or people stopped using horse-drawn carriages. But then when Bill Monroe came along and
so when was that?
in the 30s, he began experimenting with different kinds of music. He had a sound in mind, but he wasn't sure at that time what it was going to be. But when he bought his F5 mandolin as a used instrument in 1941 and pretty much used that to define his sound, then these mandolins became popular again, at least among bluegrass players, and then into other styles of music. I mean, this is the kind you kind of see most often as far as modern mandolin, is this style. There are other builders who've modified the body style a bit, but it's generally the same sort of construction, arch top with F-holes. And the oval sound hole ones are still very much in vogue too. If you want a more open, old-timey kind of sound or ragtimey kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've got one at home. It's very nice. It's from 1923.
Yeah.
A style.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know a record I had a long time ago was a bunch of classical music written. I mean, Beethoven wrote some stuff for the mandolin.
He did,
and
yeah.
Vivaldi did.
Yeah.
I think, and that's 200 years ago. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beethoven owned a mandolin. Used to play it. And composed a couple things on it. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. So it does definitely go way back. So I didn't realize that bluegrass, as we now know it, was even that new. I mean, it obviously grew out of Celtic kind of fiddle music to a certain extent.
It did, and mountain music,
and American folk music,
and before bluegrass there was the Carter family, and there were kind of some old time string bands that were country music started getting, as they knew it then, started getting popular in the 20s. And you had Jimmy Rogers, the singing brakeman. You had the various cowboy singers like Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, and these were all kind of outgrowths of country or mountain music at the time. And then Bill Monroe was kind of assimilating all this, and he also listened to like blues singers, African American blues singers at the time, and he incorporated some of that into his music. There's a lot of blues and bluegrass, and he experimented with, like, he had an accordion for a while. He had various different instruments, and then but when he started playing his F5 mandolin is kind of when, and went off on his own. His brother Charlie had a band during the 30s, and then they stopped playing together. In fact, they had kind of a falling out. And his sound was defined on the F5 mandolin. And
okay. Yeah.
So.
So that really just is World War II.
Yeah, it's a relatively young
of what
music, and then other players, other musicians started, playing bluegrass.
Right.
Also.
So when people like Grisman come along and kind of modify it and make it half jazzy and half swing and that kind of stuff, at this point that's been around for. So that was the 70s, early 70s when he was doing that. So it wasn't like he was taking a 100-year-old tradition and tweaking it. He was taking a 30-year-old tradition.
Yes, yeah.
Or even 20 by the time he was messing around with it. He'd only been around. I mean, in the early 60s.
He started playing in the early 60s, and or maybe a little before that. But he was totally into Bill Monroe. And then there's another mandolin player named Frank Wakefield, who was kind of a Monroe disciple.
Oh yeah.
Who Grisman was really into, and then sometime in the late 60s, he started kind of doing his own thing and writing tunes that were sort of bluegrass-like, but they had intervals and scales in them that you didn't normally hear in bluegrass.
Right.
And out of that came, for lack of a better term, dog music, which was kind of out of his nickname. There was this music he was writing and performing with acoustic instruments, but no one really knew what to call it. It wasn't really jazz, it wasn't really bluegrass, it wasn't really fiddle music. It had a swing to it too. It combined elements of like Django Reinhardt along with things you'd hear maybe a bluegrass, and some of them very bluegrassy, some of them more jazzy, and there was that became a catch-all phrase for music. And then he had a lot of Latin influences, a lot of like sambas and different meters that you don't hear in folk music, and so it just became encapsulated in dog music.
Yeah, yeah, it's really neat and really fun to listen to.
I listened to a lot of that for years and tried to learn how to play it, and with varying degrees of success and failure.
Yeah, well, because obviously harmonically it's a lot more complex than bluegrass stuff.
Yeah, you know, it could be artists
rhythmically and everything.
Yeah,
yeah.
You know, it's hard. It's almost hard in a way to play Monroe style really right, as it is to play, you know, like Grissman style with its more ornamented stuff. You know, it's just kind of whatever style it is. You know, to do it really well requires a lot of work. Even one might sound harder than another, and you know, some styles might be easier to get into. You know, like might be easier to get into a Monroe style initially than to play something that's really out there that has like lines in it that would sound at home in a Charlie Parker saxophone solo or something like that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you know, I did even notice when we were playing earlier in an earlier segment when we were playing Cowgirl in the Sand, you know, that when we each took a little bit of a lead, and you know, yours definitely had a characteristic that sounds like you play in the mandolin or the guitar. It was really cool. It sounded so different than what I was doing, which was a little bit more rock oriented, you know.
Yeah, I sort of, you know, got into, when I started playing like lead stuff, it was more from a bluegrassy standpoint. And as far as the mandolin, like on mandolin, I do a lot of things that are across the strings, like oh, sorry, let me do that again. And I kind of adapted them to guitar. That's kind of like almost a McReynolds style. Jesse McReynolds is a...
I was going to say it's almost Van Halen style.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because it's arpeggios mostly.
Yeah, there's arpeggio,
you know, and then using cross string things to buy you a change or something like that.
Yeah, one string's still ringing while you're fretting the next one. And on mandolin it works out really well. It just the notes really, you know, stand out, and it gives it this instrument. One thing it does not have is sustain. The only way to get a really sustained note is to do a tremolo, you know, which. And it's fine, but you're not going to be able to hit like on a violin. You can do a big long bow, and a guitar has a naturally more sustain than a mandolin, or especially an electric guitar. You can just hit a note and it'll go forever. But on the mandolin, the only way to make it happen, it's sort of an illusion of sustain, because you're really doing, you're just hitting a note that's trying to die on you repeatedly. You know, you're just always trying to wake the thing up, and then you get this. There's no way to really get it to sound like this continuous thing unless you know you resort to some kind of artificial effects.
A lot of times on the guitar, you can make something really dramatic because of. Oh, you can make stuff really dramatic because of how it decays. Yeah. Right. And by stretching out the time a little bit or something. But even when you were doing Over the Rainbow, a lot of times you would do little tremolo things in there, and as it got later in the tremolo, you might slow down a little bit and get a little softer. So it creates that, you know, you can really create almost that type of delaying decay, too.
Yeah, and part of the mandolin's charm is that tremolo. I mean, every cheesy mandolin song ever written has got that tremolo, you know. You know.
And see, if you took that tremolo effect and applied it to something like Iron Man, it would sound great.
Yeah.
Or what was that? Oh, Smoke on the Water. I was confusing my classic rock riffs.
At least at the end part there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm playing it in the right key.
It's usually done in G.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well,
that's okay. That was still perfect. Way perfect enough for our Richie Blackmore excursion. So, anyway. Well, appreciate all that's kind of fun stuff. Thanks for taking a little time to tell us about your most loved instrument, probably.
No problem. Should I play something to take us out?
Yeah. What do you got?
Well, let's see. I'll do a little tune here with a really politically incorrect name, but I like to play it on mandolin. It's called Colored Aristocracy. It's
I used to do a finger picking version of that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. We should play that sometime.
Yeah, that I picked up out of this one of the first ragtime books I got, Contemporary Ragtime Guitar by Stephen Grossman. That really got me into doing some ragtime finger picking.
Cool. I want to hear you do
and
that.
so it's like an old fiddle tune or something.
Yeah, it
right?
is.
Yeah. So actually, so before you do that, let me just I just want to thank Mike for coming out and visiting with us today and bringing out his cool mandolin. And we did some neat guitar stuff and things too. So we will let him take us out. We'll see more of him at Totally Guitars, I'm sure.
It's been thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you.
Sure.
Hope I have something to contribute.
Oh, this is great. And yeah, go ahead. Take us out with Colored Aristocracy.
Okay.
Mike Mullins, thanks a lot.